This is Aubrey Bettencourt, President and CEO of Almond Alliance. This is Almond Alert. Hey everyone, it's Aubrey Bettencourt, President and CEO of the Almond Alliance, and welcome to Almond Alert, our weekly podcast or bi-weekly podcast. Whatever it ends up being, it will be fabulous. But thank you again for joining us today. This is an opportunity for us to bring in more information to you to help you make better decisions, have a better understanding, greater context of what's going on in our world today and how it affects our industry and our communities. I think so often in our world, especially in ag, we have a tendency to listen to all the same stuff. And our mission with this podcast is to bring in different points of view, expand those points of context and other information to provide you with the most information, diverse resources so that you can make the best decision, because we all know we didn't get to be the third largest agricultural export without having that level of sophistication. So today I am more than happy to welcome an old friend and colleague, going back to the water wars. I think when I first got started, Dan, I think you were one of the first folks I started working with, who has been a great teacher and friend and partner through the world of ag and water, where our feet are in both places. Dan Keppen is with the Farmer Alliance, which is a tremendous organization that spans the Western U.S. that works on just that nexus of natural resource management and agricultural need. Dan has been a water warrior for as long as I've known him. And I think we have a mutual background, having both worked at the Department of Interior, and has a tremendous perspective, not only on state, but also on federal issues. And I so appreciate always being able to reach out to you, Dan, on just that Western-wide perspective. And so with that, I want to welcome Dan Keppen. And Dan, tell us a little bit about the Alliance for those who don't know, and your journey a little bit.
Sure. Well, Aubrey, it's great to see you. Thanks for this opportunity today. So I've actually been doing Western water in a variety of different capacities for over 30 years. My master's degree is in water resources engineering, which is a civil engineering program at Oregon State University. I started out doing engineering work in Oregon and also in the northern Sacramento Valley. I ran a flood control district in Tehama County, and got kind of eased into politics back in the early 90s, doing work on Cal-Fed issues and groundwater management issues. And we also had 3 floods while I was in Tehama County. So I got buried in the agonizing, conflicting federal flood policy matters. Worked the Northern California Water Association for 3 years. Did 1 year at the Bureau, as you mentioned earlier. And while I was there in 2001, the Klamath Irrigation project was curtailed for the first time in 95 years for for Endangered Species Act regulation, basically. But during the course of that year, I was actually hired by the Klamath Water Use Association, moved up to Klamath. I've been here since then. In the last 17 years, I've been working with the Farmer Alliance as executive director. Our organization started in California. It actually started in Fresno. There was a group of farmers from San Joaquin Valley with a group of farmers from Arizona at a Kentucky Derby function, and they were just talking about the need to try to get farmers and ranchers back to DC to meet directly with members of Congress and policymakers. And so that's sort of the foundation of the Farmer Lobby cornerstone program of Farmer Alliance. And now we've grown to include members in all 17 Western states. We primarily focus just on water. So we're all about advocating for reliable water supplies for Western irrigators in the 17 Western states. And we deal primarily with federal matters. We engage with Congress, extensively, and with the federal agencies on those issues that have sort of an impact on our collective West-wide membership. Aubrey.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we definitely. I know early on where you and I think got first engaged with each other was during some of the early, more extreme curtailments and droughts on the CBP as well. And
Yep.
we've definitely both worked on Klamath, which I think we have a mutual friend who calls it the Vietnam of water. Once you're in, you just can't get out. And I definitely have fallen in love with that area, and we've worked on that many times. So let's key in here on the federal side of things. I think so often for us with being a California commodity, a California dominated commodity, though we are starting to see, these trees are chasing the water and they're going to go looking in other places. Now, right now, the entire West is in kind of water turmoil. I think I watch the Colorado now just as much as I watch the CBP. And what happens there is having a direct effect on what's happening to the operations here. Let's start with that. What's kind of your read is kind of that Western region perspective? We know here we're heading into another year of an extreme drought. Everybody's taking bets on it, what kind of a La Nina we're in. But that doesn't mean anything if we don't know how the system is going to be operated when it starts raining. So maybe give us a little bit of your assessment of kind of however you want to do it, scale it up and down or scale it down and back up.
Well, I think the big thing that's been consistent over the last couple of years is the drought, and just Mother Nature is drying things out for the last 2 years. On the Colorado River, like you mentioned, it's been 23 years of drought. But California and Klamath, where I live, and Central Oregon, where you have these federal water projects like the Central Valley Project in California, Klamath Project here. Um, Increasingly those projects are not being able to be operated the way that they were designed to be operated, right? I mean, the CVP was originally designed to store water primarily for ag use, right? To help water the best farmland in the world. You guys have one of the few Mediterranean climates in the whole world, and also municipal and industrial needs at the time. So, I mean, granted, environmental priorities were not the priority that they are today, and that's changed quite a bit in the last 50 years. But essentially, what's happened is not only do we have the drought challenges, but we have increasingly inflexible water management that's happening when you have that federal nexus. And I would say CVP is probably the poster child for that inflexibility,
Mhm.
as is Klamath. You've
Yeah.
got this flow centric mentality right now, where the agencies, the fishery agencies, are essentially taking water that was intended to be stored and used in dry years and sending it out to the ocean to meet these, perceived ESA needs. And that's all well and good, but the frustrating thing, as you know, is there's no empirical evidence that shows that that reallocation is helping those targeted fish species. So that's the frustrating thing right now. Is I think California and Colorado River Basin, because you have a tie, Bay Delta operations have an impact on the Colorado River Basin
Mhm.
because Met gets their water, a lot of it, out of the state water project, which is very, very much controlled by environmental operating constraints in the Delta. So when less water goes down the California aqueduct to Southern California, they're focused more on the Colorado River flows. And we're having struggles there right now because we have a lot of districts that rely on that water. Imperial Irrigation District, the Yuma districts are members of Family Farm Alliance. So, like you, I mean, I'm spending way more time on Colorado River than I ever thought I would living up here in Southern Oregon.
No, it's true. I've been on the phone with those guys down there. And I mean, we do have some almonds being grown towards the border and actually across into Arizona as well, which is concerning, right? I'm looking at it from, it's been interesting being in this position now, looking at it from a water perspective, but also, we have a product we have to deliver. We have global demand for that product. And so those resources that are necessary to input that. This is such an interesting time. And what I've been telling folks is the decisions being made on the ground right now across the West, both on farm, but even just a little bit up at the kind of the regional level, especially, this is going to set the course, I think, for water management for the rest of the century. What's happening? Because that's directly going back up into these policy decisions that are happening with our federal partners, as well as our state partners. So, you real quick, just for folks listening, when we talk about fisheries, we're talking about our fish agencies. We're talking about National Marine Fisheries at the Department of Commerce, and we're talking about the Department of Fish and Wildlife at the Department of Interior. Those are our federal fish agencies. Why they aren't all together, that's another story. But other than the Department of Commerce handles the fish that migrate, and Fish and Wildlife handles the fish that are everywhere and all other critters. So those are our great critter agencies. For those that don't know, and you're absolutely right in terms of we're getting to a point where the 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 impressions that have been made that everything is predicated on flow, that that's the only factor we're looking at, that this is the way we have to manage the system in order to save the species, have yet to produce those results. And I think that's been the biggest revelation and what has continued to come forward, which is something that your organization particularly had led in, I think, going into the last administration and into this one as well. Could you talk a little bit more? You were talking about the farmer lobby and that effort and the work that you have done, which I think is so revolutionary. And this is getting more tactical, but I think it's important to understand how effective the Family Farm Alliance has been through the ability to prioritize and then message around that priority and be the first in the door with the list of things that you need and just work the list. Can you talk about the family lobby and the background of that project?
Sure, sure. So, I mean, this is really, we just got back from Washington. I did actually flew into Sacramento on Friday, but we were down there for a week. We had 30 farmer lobbyists from 6 different states, including California. And, when we go back, you got to consider sort of the timing of where you're at, um, and the issues that are hot. And right now, Colorado River is a very, very big issue. The drought is huge. The drought, we always use the drought with our lobbying message to sort of tell policymakers it's bad, it's really bad. And it's underscoring, like 4 things that we've been saying forever. One, the water management's getting more and more inflexible in the West, like I just talked about with the federal regulations. Second is it clearly shows we need more infrastructure
Mhm.
for a lot of reasons. We stopped building water infrastructure over the last 20 or 30 years. And fortunately, we've got a lot of funding now to tackle that particular issue. And the drought helped us politically to, make that happen. The third thing is, the fires that we're having.
Mhm.
The wildfires are, when you look at the watersheds, most of these watersheds above our irrigation districts are federal lands. And frankly, the federal agencies have stopped managing the forest because of litigation. And these forests are just terrible. They're in bad shape. They're burning up, and they're not generating the sort of water that they used to that a healthy forest should. And so the drought underscores that we got to do something on the forest management front, which has a tie to water. And then finally, the areas where you have collaboration going on, like Yakima, like in Central Oregon, where we're doing a lot of modernization types of things. Those are the areas that seem to weather these droughts better. So the silver lining with the drought is it makes our arguments easier because you can just say, look, this is what's happening. Plus, I think it's really giving real uh, the silver lining of it all is it's really showing that people are starting to not take ag for granted. I would say with these high food prices and what's happening with Ukraine right now, all these things and the drought, food's getting more expensive. It's getting more scarce. We're going to have some major global famine occurring in the next year, based on what the United Nations is saying. We'll never have a better opportunity, Aubrey, to let consumers understand how important Western irrigated ag is. So it was those sort of messages that we drove into all of our meetings, be it with members of Congress or committee staff or the agencies themselves. And so infrastructure, getting those the infrastructure dollars spent effectively was a big part of our message. Forest health, we met with the Forest Service heads, the NRCS heads. We got to make sure we can get in there and manage the forests, and then the Colorado River. I would say those are sort of the 3 big issues. But the drought that's there all the time really helps us drive solutions related to those issues.
Yeah, my mind's kind of going a couple of different ways in terms of getting some insight here. What can you drill in a little bit on where you see opportunity points right now? Right, we're seeing there's a stark contrast between one administration to the next right now, and maybe give us a little bit of that insider baseball around where are the influence points, where are you spending energy without showing everybody your cards, where are you spending the energy because that's the most critical point of influence given the conditions that we're in today politically.
Yeah, well, it all comes down to relationships, and so we have different sort of alliances and different points of contact on certain issues. Farm bill, we got a new farm bill coming up, 2023 farm bill. So traditionally, we've worked with constructive conservation groups and national ag groups on conservation dollars and programs that allow our farmers and ranchers to do good things for the environment, but get paid to do it and help their bottom line. Um, Politically, I think the sense is right now that Republicans are likely going to take over the House of Representatives. And so there's been concerns about all the money that's being spent. There's definitely a heavy, heavy emphasis right now with this administration, with this Congress on climate fixes. And that's all well and good. But, I think the regulatory stuff, which slows a lot of these processes down, the permitting, NEPA, Clean Water Act, all those sort of things. Um, we haven't since the Trump administration left. We haven't had lots of conversations about that. And when you were at the Trump administration, Aubrey, the work that you did and that the administration did on modernizing the implementation of NEPA and Clean Water Act and Endangered Species Act was huge. And the new administration came in, as often is the case with a different party coming in, erased a lot of that stuff. And that was very disappointing to us. I think if Republicans do control the House at a minimum in the next Congress, we're going to see more discussion going back to the regulations. It doesn't matter if you got billions of dollars if you can't spend it in an efficient way. You're not gonna get things fixed.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest misnomers of what's fallen out of all of this, we say spending, well, it's designated spending. And I think that's a nuance that a lot of folks don't understand. That BIA dollar, right? The Bipartisan Infrastructure Act, 80+% of that has to go through state agencies. And those state agencies have to have those programs in place to drop that money into. And this administration hasn't rolled it out as fast as it could have been. I think because of some of those requirements. So I think the misnomer here is, oh, all this money's been spent and it's going to hit the ground. Actually, we're not seeing it hit the ground nearly as fast as you would think. And I think that lends itself to opportunity for folks like us to be in position to help folks spend that money, right? And to get it on the
Right.
ground most efficiently. But you bring up a good point, which is the regulatory component to that also slows down the investment that's critical. So I love that, yeah, right. The administrations are all listening to us calling for infrastructure like we have been for the last 10 years. But to your point, that money isn't effective if it doesn't have to play by effective or efficient rules. And when you consider that what an average NEPA on a on a good timeline takes 6 years at least, and that's just the federal
Right.
National Environmental Protection Act review process. On a good time, on a good timeline, it's 6 years, but you're really looking more like 10. And the amount of money that goes into that, and what that means to small water districts, bringing this back home to our farmers and ranchers, right? It's our small water districts that are typically the partners, or a small agency or a regional entity that's the partner in this, and the process that they have to go through. And if you get knocked down at some point, what happens? We get knocked back. And that a lot in there. It's that coupling of not just the physical investment, but it's the policy investment.
Right. No, it's huge. So, and it's not just sort of the regulations. I mean, so I know you got lots of experience, FSA and USDA. There's a lot of money in the bipartisan infrastructure law for that.
Mhm.
A whole bunch more got dropped in this Inflation Reduction Act, for climate smart conservation title sort of work. We're really bird dogging the Bureau of Reclamation right now because they got 8.3 billion in there for Western water infrastructure, including new storage projects above and below ground, conveyance, you know, conservation, bunch of stuff. Another 4 billion in the Inflation Reduction Act, which is intended to deal with drought. The focus is sort of on Colorado River, but definitely Central Valley folks will be able to apply for those dollars too. But getting the stuff done and cutting through the red tape is hugely important. But we also, there's been decisions that have been made. For example, the PL 566 program, which is the NRCS watershed program, which is
Killer
hugely
program.
flexible.
Yep.
Folks do some great things with it. We have people throughout the West that have been doing these projects where they're taking old canal systems and converting them to pressurized pipe, which yields all kinds of multiple benefits. We got projects that are in sort of the queue to continue to be moving forward. And last spring, the Department of Agriculture had $400 million to spend there, and most of it went to feasibility studies for single-purpose flood control dams back east, right in West Virginia. Imagine. So, those sorts of decisions too, are huge. And I think we really made that point when we were back in D.C. last week. We met with Robert Bonney, who's Undersecretary, Bill Northey's replacement. He's been very, very good to work with,
Mhm.
really receptive, and I think he sees some of the projects that are out there in the West. Really, not only do they tackle climate change issues that the administration's super focused on, but they're drought resilient as well. So
Yeah.
that just gives another example, sort of political decisions that can be made by the administration that are surely well intended, but they can have unintended consequences. And right now, we got a bunch of projects, hundreds of millions of projects out west that are ready to move forward, and they kind of got stalled because the money went to these feasibility studies back east.
See, and that couples back into what you were talking about really early on in this conversation around the infrastructure and how it functions. It's so interesting to me that the very project that everyone is vilifying is actually the solution to everything they're trying to address, right? Because we have built an entire society, including our environmental protection now, is
Right.
predicated on critical infrastructure. And
Yep.
so what's so interesting about that is it's a system built for certainty. And the way we get certainty to address climate, to address drought, to address socioeconomic issues that are associated with that is going to be through flexibility of the operation, right? That's
Absolutely.
such an amazing. It sounds like it sounds like they're juxtaposed to each other, but actually, the flexibility of operation provides the certainty of water supply, and
That's
for
right.
all users. And so I love that you're bringing in the regional parts of this. We've had a great working relationship with Robert Bonney. I think you're absolutely right. NRCS and rural development are both underutilized by our agricultural community when it comes to more of this regional infrastructure development, especially out
Right.
west. And so I know that's something you and I have talked about for a long time. I want to come back to one last thing as we're kind of, coming down to an end. You and I have talked about messaging for forever. I think we've
Yes.
ended up just sitting at a bar talking about it, going, "How are we ever going to get this right?"
Yeah. That's the
I
thing you and I have been working on for the longest, Aubrey, right? Is messaging, getting the ag message out.
Right. And how do we do that? When we're 1.5% of the population feeding the other 98.5. We always talked about having that moment of hope during COVID, that glimmer where we had this chance where we were on CNN for like 4 days.
Yeah.
Farmers forefront. I think we are in this incredible moment where so many inflationary, whether it's inflation, the conflict in Ukraine. One of the things that is just baffling to me that the pieces haven't quite been put together is the whole world is in a drought right now.
Yeah.
China is in a massive drought. Africa's in a massive drought.
South America.
Brazil is in a massive drought. South America is in a massive drought.
Hmm.
And we're in this age of total abundance. If you look at just the time cost of what we can do today and the level of efficiency and the environmental component, but the efficiency creates affordability, which also creates the environmental capacity, I would say. And the world is about to be very hungry. How were you communicating that in your most recent visit? How was it received? Where do we go from here? How do we better make that message connect with our consumer?
Well, so I'll step back a little bit. My board of directors meets once a year face to face because they're scattered all over the West,
Mhm.
and we have our annual conference in Reno. We have a whole day of meetings leading up to it. The number one priority for my board this year was they saw that this Ukraine invasion was going to have a major impact on global grain supplies and also fertilizer availability, right? The
Yes.
supply chain issue has been the fertilizer issue is huge. The price of fertilizer is 3 times more today than it was last year,
Mhm.
in part due to what's happening with the war. But also, even before the war, we had a report from the United Nations that global hunger was at the highest levels ever last year, and it's
Mhm.
expected to be even higher again this year. You got those things going on. You got inflation. People are like, "Why is our food so expensive?" It's the input costs, and there's some policies involved with that as well. And the food availability. I think this fall, because of what's happening in California in particular, tomato products are going to be tougher to get. They're going to be more expensive. People are not going to have the abundance in the grocery stores the way they used to. But it's remarkable to me that people haven't connected. Like here you have all these things happening: global food price or availability, rising food prices in our own country, and yet we have the best producers in the world in the Central Valley and the Klamath and Central Oregon and in Colorado River. And in some of those places, our governments voluntarily taking their water from them, right? I mean, these your people down there could be producing food and helping with this whole situation, but the policies of the state of California and these federal water projects right now is that the environmental water is more important than ag water, and so in order to draw attention to that issue, we work with California Farm Water Coalition and some of the Klamath guys. Our friend Scott Soyce was one of those people. A local Klamath farmer came up to me right after my meeting in Reno and said, why don't we run an ad in like the New York Times or some big paper just saying, explaining to policymakers and the public where their food comes from and how what we do out here in the West is related to all that. And so we ran a full page ad. We raised $140,000 in like 5 days, ran a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal on April 4th. And then we did a social media campaign on top of that all summer long, drawing attention to it. Last I heard, Mike Wade told me that we're over 4 million visits. And we have a landing page that kind of tells our side of the story on this whole issue. And I think about 150,000 people roughly have gone to that landing page to spend an average of 5 minutes looking at our data, all the crops that are grown in California and the Western United States, and how important that is to our national security. So that was done in April. I would say I'm starting to see on almost a daily basis, people are starting to connect the dots between
Mm.
Ukraine, global famine, food prices, and the Western drought, and how important our Western producers are to, help solve some of those problems. So it's coming along, and I still say this. I think we're never going to have a better opportunity than we do right now for average consumers to really understand where their food comes from. It just doesn't come from Bonds or Safeway. It comes from a strong domestic food supply, and Western irrigated agriculture, including California, is a huge part of that.
Yeah, I think the message that I've been trying to communicate to a lot of policymakers has been, because I get the question all the time, especially from my urbans, right? Why are
Mhm.
my constituents, their grocery bill is so high right now? And
Yep.
overly simplified, but not far from the truth. It is so basic to human existence. Okay, well, if you want to get their bills down, then you have to prioritize the domestic food supply, which means you have to prioritize the inputs for that. And
Right.
that's our water, our fuel, our energy. All of that has to be component into that, and making that a priority makes it a priority to them. It's a long. We're trying to reconnect to our like ancient roots of understanding our connection to our food supply that we've lost thanks to so much of what we've done so well. And I think that's been the challenge, and I think that's something that I know I've you and I've worked on and noodle on every time we get together. We chew on this idea, and
Yep.
how we can get more messengers communicating the same thing. How do we find that one thing that makes it relevant to that consumer again? Because ultimately, I think it comes back to reestablishing that relationship with our consumer on such a basic level, and the importance of
Yes.
the farmer in our society.
Yep. Well, the Wall Street Journal ad was interesting. You and I are always sort of in the weeds on this stuff. And when I'm around other water wonks, people are like, well, we got to be talking about the government regulations and what that's doing.
Oh,
People don't get it. They don't want to get it, right? That part of it. But if you can at least say, look, see this picture that we put in the Wall Street Journal of these empty food shelves? That's what's going to happen, and people can connect to that much easier than getting into the technical weeds like I tend to do sometimes. So we just got to continue that, and I have a feeling with Thanksgiving coming up next month, people are going to be digging deep in their pockets this year. For their Thanksgiving meal, and there might be things that they're used to having on the table that they're not going to be able to get this year. So I just put that on your screen. Might be
yeah.
something to talk about here as far as messaging goes the next month.
Well, I mean, who doesn't like an almond crusted turkey? I'm just gonna say it's delicious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
Well,
but
your industry's done an amazing job on the messaging because almonds were much, or almonds if you're from Chico, where I used to live, they're much maligned, right, by some, and people. That's the frustrating thing is farmers constantly get attacked for how much water they use. It's really not the farmers that are using the water; it's the food that other people are eating in places like Los Angeles and San Francisco. That's where most of the water is being consumed when you actually look at the charts. But
and I think
um,
you're bringing up something so important. We get distracted by that because,
yeah,
and something we learned, and I'm constantly reminding everybody, our consumer actually, when asked in focus groups, they forget that factoid until we bring it up to them
yeah,
while they're snacking, and they go, "Oh yeah, munch." Like it's the I think we give it more credibility than we should. We should stand on, and you've heard me say this spiel however many times. We're going to plant our flag. We're not going to explain. We are the expert in our field.
yeah,
And I regaining our power as an industry and as a community. And I think that helps our farmers too. You and I represent a
yeah,
lot of hardworking people that have felt beaten down because they're going through some of the roughest years of their lives. And I think coming back to, hey, listen, you're still an expert. Be the expert. Be calm, be rational, own your space, and don't let anyone belittle you for bringing the world healthy
Yeah.
food and bringing prowess to the American economy in the world.
Well, the reality is people are buying almonds all over the world because it's a great, tasty source of protein, right? So
Absolutely.
that says it all right there.
That's it. That absolutely is.
Yep.
Well, Dan, looking ahead just a little bit. I know you already kind of gave us some insight on the communication side. Looking ahead, House flips, Republicans take the House.
I think that's going to happen. The Senate is too close to call.
Yeah.
Probably the sense I got is Democrats probably are sort of in the driver's seat there, but you never know. I mean, I misread the last election completely, Aubrey. So, but that's my sense. I think everybody's pretty much on the same page that the Republicans will soon control the House. The margin may not be as great as some thought it was going to be a couple months ago, but the bottom line is if they have the majority, they get to run the committees, they get to set the agenda for the committees. I can guarantee you regulatory reform and just shining the spotlight on some of these decades old environmental laws that are well intended that aren't being implemented in a very practical way is going to be part of the monthly agenda here for the next 2 years.
Well, and I think that might be the most important thing that could happen, right? Because when you end up with a split Congress plus a split on the administration, the executive, the best thing someone in the minority can do, or now the newly created majority can do, is put a spot on that.
Right.
Start asking the right questions and doing exactly what you and I have been talking about, which is communicate this. Because I think we've oversimplified it almost to our detriment. And being able to bring that back up to, let's really look at the dollars and cents of what's happening here, and is it really benefiting the species? Because
Right.
you and I both know we would all adapt if we knew it was benefiting. And the biggest heartbreak has been it's not.
Yeah, and the other thing, Aubrey, is the single species management, which is sort of the paradigm of Endangered Species Act administration. It's affecting so many other species.
Mhm.
And when you look at Central Valley and you look at the Klamath Project in particular, those are two critical areas for the Pacific Flyway,
Mhm.
waterfowl.
Yes.
And that flow-centric mentality is essentially draining our watersheds and sending that water out to the ocean, and rice fields aren't getting water and our farmers aren't getting water in Klamath. The refuges went dry for the
Yeah.
first time ever this year in Klamath. What's
Which
that going to do to the Pacific Flyway? There's theories out there that it could shift completely. And what would that do? That's like one of the great parts of our community here in the Klamath Basin is
Mhm.
having all those flyway birds here every year. But it's impacting, it's not just impacting farms and ranches, it's impacting other species, and the species it's intended to protect don't seem to be benefiting either.
Yeah. If we're not doing what we intended to do, we should probably stop and check ourselves, right? I mean, that's logic.
Yes.
Uh, One thing we didn't talk about that you and I have worked on extensively in the last few years has been better coordination across the different agencies
Hmm.
and departments. I got a little insider from last time I talked to Robert Bonney that he's meeting more regularly with Interior.
Yeah.
Have you been that sounded like something you would have facilitated. Have you been working on
Well,
that?
we hammer on it all the time. So, of
Yeah.
course, I'm one of the biggest fans of the previous administration's water subcabinet, which you were intimately involved with, and you did a great job. I mean, you basically you staffed that, that group, and we saw so many good things happen out of that. And even when the new administration came in, that was one concept that seemed that they supported was doing
Yes.
something like that. So there is a drought, sort of a drought, an interagency drought group. It's Interior and USDA working together, and I know the Corps. Mike
Mhm.
Connor works closely with the assistant secretaries at Interior and USDA. So it's been good, but it would be nice to see it even more coordinated and more sort of visible. So we'll see. We hammered on that when we were in DC almost every day. We're also pushing to do the same thing on the forestry front. We need to have these agencies get out of their silos when it
Yes.
comes to the federal forest management. Reclamation's got to be sitting down with Chief of Forest Service and NRCS, Interior Department, talking
BLM.
about these federal forests and how to manage them for water.
You jumped my shark, man. That's where we wanted to go next. We wanted to do a
Yeah,
men's subcab around that idea. Well, I think there's something you and I could definitely both work on, and maybe we should do a joint hosted event where we invite them all and sit them down.
yeah,
We'll host our own summit and see if we can't show them that working together actually makes this easier for all of us.
Yes.
Um,
Well, speaking of Joe Manchin, Pat O'Toole, my board president, testified for his energy committee on Thursday on this very issue. And he seems to be very receptive to this idea of better coordination between the federal agencies on federal forest management. So,
Yeah, it's
um,
incredible, especially around water and lands management, how we have so many different agencies that have their fingers in it, right? There's so many jurisdictions spread across so many agencies, and the misnomer is that they all seem to be working together. They don't. They don't
no,
at all. And
no.
so that's, I think as the regular everyday American, when you go, well, it doesn't make sense. Why does this department do this and that department do that? Well, it's because they don't actually talk to each other.
Yeah. Well, we've got members here just north of me in Oregon that had a great watershed project that involved the Forest Service and involved U.S. Department of Agriculture, NRCS, the Bureau of Reclamation. They ended up having to do multiple National Environmental Policy Act processes. Yeah, when why can't you just do it under one, one-stop shop, so to speak,
We
which
should
just
call.
kills you. It kills your timing and it kills your cash flow, and prices are going up through the roof right now. It's going to end up, costing so much more because they couldn't have done this in a streamlined way under, one umbrella.
Yeah, the one federal decision model is it's important for one because having a federal government should make one decision. When you have, that's where we get jagged up in lawsuits, right? Because you have one agency will say something different from another, but they're not required to agree with each other, and under the law it actually acknowledges that, and then you end up in court for forever.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
so forcing that one federal decision is not about coercion. It's about coming to the most perfect solution, not a perfect solution, but a more perfect solution, right? The idea that everybody's going to give and push and pull until finally they all agree on something. And that's what you have to work with. And then you have consistency. And to your point, it's the speed of that. These dollars, I mean, if you're a taxpayer in anywhere other than ag and you're looking at where dollars are going for infrastructure in rural communities, which you're like, I can't get on the bus in time in Oakland or something, right? Why are you giving money to some rural community out in, or some county out in Eastern Oregon? Well, guess what? The process affects them too. Those dollars do not get spent efficiently. If I'm just the regular taxpayer, I'm pissed because the amount of time that takes is my taxpayer dollar not doing what is intended to do, which then means the whole thing costs more, which is more of my
Right.
taxpayer dollar not going to what it's intended to do. There's a lot of reform, I think, on the financing side that we could definitely be focused on too, and that's something I know I'm looking at heading into next year because, to your point, the cost of everything is going up. So all these dollars are supposed to go out, and the longer they take to get on the ground, the more expensive the project becomes, and the longer it takes to get it done too.
Yep.
And for rural communities who have to put a lot of money on the line to get through these processes, it just guts me when when they get canceled and they get denied on a project or an application and they have to start all over again. And
Yep.
there's a more efficient way to do this. And I think you and I have had a glimpse of that. I know you have definitely been a leader in that space and a wonderful supporter and champion in that space. And I think we have a lot of work to do together going forward. So I'm looking forward to partnering more, Dan,
Yeah.
and
Me
that
too, Aubrey. We have a great personal relationship, a great professional relationship, and I know, well, through groups like the Western Ag and Conservation Coalition, we're going to be working, close
yep.
in the coming years.
Yeah, we're excited about it. So, well, thanks so
Good.
much, Dan. Hopefully, we can do this
Yeah.
again. And you're always welcome. We'll send snacks. We are in charge of snacks. And we have
Okay.
a lot of almonds right now, so I'm happy to send them to you. Would you like a 40-foot
Yes.
container? Or
Yeah. Absolutely.
so we'll send them your way.
All
Thanks so
right.
much for your
Thanks,
time, Dan.
Aubrey.
Appreciate it. And to everybody else listening, if you want to learn more, you can visit the Family Farm Alliance at familyfarmalliance.org. Encourage you to do that. Check out the great work that Dan's doing. And if you ever want to know what's really going on the ground in the West, his newsletters are top notch. Half the time I sound smart because I'm reading what Dan sends out. So thank you so much for your time, Dan. And thanks to
All
everybody
right.
else listening.
Thank
We'll
you.
see you soon. Take care.
Yeah.
I always love talking to Dan. And you can see how we just have that shorthand and we feed off of each other. And I think it comes back to that passion and that creativity. This is what is so critical about where we are as an organization right now. As the Almond Alliance is starting to look at its priorities for 2023, and actually has been for quite some time, what has been so apparent is the level of play that we need to be at as the third largest agricultural export of the United States, claiming our space at the federal level. Yes, California and the chaos of Sacramento still happens, but where we can counterbalance and where we can actually address some of these underlying things is also being in that federal space and claiming our space and having key partners like Dan and the Family Farm Alliance with that network across the Western US, tying us into other aspects of agriculture, expands our influence, expands our reach, gets us out of just being California, and really helps to tell the story uh, and communicate uh, to decision makers, but also gives us a platform, getting other entities to ask for things that we need in just as much as they do. And so having multiple partners and the strategic partners all echoing the same requests when the waitress comes around to order at farm bill time or at appropriations time or at any time, whoever knows what they want to eat and how they want it cooked gets served first. So having friends and partners like Dan, making sure that we have our priorities set and are playing right there with them and standing right there with them is what moves the needle. When we leverage our power and our position and our gravitas and weight and strength, it has the ability to move the needle. Dan has had much experience with that. I've been a partner with him on both sides of that. We know how to do this game, and looking forward to a lot of fun as we partner and work together through that process.